The red dust of Kepler 442b blew across the rocky ground as Corporal Kim Hannah pressed herself against the stone wall. Her shoulder burned where the plasma blast had hit her. The pain made her teeth clench with each heartbeat. Her medical bag felt so heavy now, pulling at her tired body. The ambush had come from nowhere. One moment her squad was walking through the narrow canyon, checking for enemy movement. The next moment, bright energy bolts were flying everywhere. Her teammates had scattered in different directions. The hostile Vorthan soldiers had chased her deeper into this strange landscape than she had ever been before. Hannah pulled out her communication device with shaking hands. "Command, this is Medic 77, she said in a quiet voice. She waited for an answer. Only crackling static came back to her. She was alone. The cave opening in front of her looked like her best chance to survive. It was dark inside, which meant she could hide. It looked deep enough to give her good protection. Most importantly, it seemed empty. Hannah hoped no dangerous creatures lived inside. She checked her sidearm pistol one more time. The weapon still had power. Her hands moved carefully as she entered the cave. The light from her helmet cut through the darkness like a bright sword. She moved slowly, ready for anything that might attack her. What she saw next made her stop breathing for a moment. Two tiny cat-like animals sat against the far wall of the cave. Their fur should have been beautiful and shiny, but now it was dirty and stuck together with old blood. These were Kythera cubs. Every intelligent species in the entire galaxy knew to fear their adult parents. Adult Kythera were the most dangerous hunters in known space. They had killed many coalition soldiers over the years. These babies could not be more than a few weeks old. Their bright golden eyes caught her helmet light and seemed to glow back at her. They made small, weak crying sounds. Behind the two cubs, their mother lay on the cold cave floor. She was not moving. She was not breathing. She was dead. Everything Hannah had learned in military training told her to turn around and leave immediately. Kythera were killers. Even baby ones would grow up to be deadly predators. The smart thing to do was to get as far away as possible. Find another hiding place. Wait for rescue somewhere else. But something much deeper than her training made her kneel down on the cave floor instead. Something that came from being human made her stay. The cubs were dying of hunger. The little creatures looked at her with those golden eyes. They were so thin she could see their small ribs through their fur. They tried to make crying sounds, but they barely had strength left. They had been alone with their dead mother for days, maybe longer. Soon they would die too. Hannah had seen this look before. In her hometown back on Earth, she had found stray cats and dogs that looked exactly like this. Hungry, scared, needing help. Her human heart could not ignore that need, even when the creatures were supposed to be her enemies. "Okay, little ones," she whispered as she opened her medical kit. Her voice was soft and gentle. "Let's see what we can do to help you." The cubs watched her every movement. They did not try to run away. They did not try to attack her. They seemed to understand somehow that she wanted to help them. When she reached slowly toward them, they did not move back. Her medical supplies included emergency food packets. The food was made for humans, but it was better than nothing. Hannah mixed some of the food powder with water from her canteen. She made it into a thin soup that the babies might be able to drink. The first cub, the slightly larger one, sniffed at the mixture. Then it began to drink. Its small pink tongue lapped up the food eagerly. The second cub followed. Soon both of them were eating for the first time in days. While they ate, Hannah used her medical scanner to check them for injuries. The scanner showed they were weak from hunger but not badly hurt. She cleaned the dried blood from their fur with antiseptic wipes. Under the dirt and blood, their fur was actually a beautiful silver color with blue highlights that seemed to change in the light. As she worked, something strange happened. The cubs began to relax around her. They moved closer to her instead of staying afraid. When she sat back against the cave wall to rest her injured shoulder, both cubs crawled over to her. They curled up against her legs, sharing their warmth. One of the cubs began to make a low, rumbling sound. It took Hannah a moment to realize what it was. The cub was purring, just like the cats back home on Earth. Outside the cave, she could hear Vorthan voices in the distance. They were still searching for her. She would have to stay hidden until her own people could find her. That might take days. She looked down at the two small creatures sleeping against her legs. They trusted her completely now. They had no one else left in the world except her. Hannah made her decision. She would protect them no matter what happened next. Something told her this was the beginning of something very important. Something that would change everything. 3 days had passed since Hannah disappeared during the ambush. Lieutenant Park Jin-ho felt sick with worry as he led his search team through the twisting canyon paths. The rocky walls rose high on both sides, creating deep shadows even in the middle of the day. His boots crunched on the red dust that covered everything on this planet. Walking beside him was his partner Veltar, an Andromedan soldier whose body looked like it was made of living crystal. Blue light pulsed under Veltar's transparent skin as he used his natural scanning abilities to search for any sign of their missing teammate. Veltar's people could detect heat signatures and life forms much better than humans could. "Anything yet?" Jinho asked, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. He had known Hannah since basic training. She was one of the best medics in their unit and a good friend. The thought of losing her made his stomach twist. Veltar stopped walking and tilted his crystal head, concentrating hard. His inner light grew brighter as he focused his senses. "Heat signature 200 meters northeast," he said finally. His voice sounded strange, like wind blowing through glass chimes. "But the readings are very unusual." "Unusual how?" asked Sergeant Chinwei, the third member of their search team. She raised her rifle slightly, ready for trouble. "There are 3 warm bodies in that direction. 1 human-sized. 2 others that are different." Veltar's crystal face showed confusion. "The smaller heat sources are not human, but they are very close to the human signature. Almost touching." Jinho felt his heart beat faster. "Could be hostiles holding her prisoner," he said. "We go in carefully." They moved through the rocks toward the cave opening Veltar had detected. Each step was quiet and controlled. Their weapons were ready to fire at the first sign of danger. Jinho had seen too many coalition soldiers killed by surprise attacks. He would not let that happen to his team. As they got closer to the cave, they could hear soft sounds coming from inside. Not the harsh voices of Vorthan soldiers, but something else. Something that sounded almost peaceful. Jinho raised his hand to signal the others to stop. He listened carefully. Was that humming? Someone was humming a gentle tune inside the cave. It sounded like Hannah's voice. They reached the cave entrance and looked inside. What they saw made all 3 soldiers freeze in complete shock. Hannah sat with her legs crossed on the cave floor. She looked tired and her uniform was dirty, but she was alive and seemed unhurt. In her hands was a small container of military food rations. She was carefully feeding the contents to 2 young animals that sat in her lap. The animals were like nothing Jinho had ever seen up close. They had sleek fur that shimmered with silver and blue colors. Their bodies were cat-like but larger and more muscular than Earth cats. Their eyes were bright gold and very intelligent. These were Kithra cubs. Every soldier in the coalition knew about adult Kithra. They were the most feared predators in this part of the galaxy. They stood as tall as a human at the shoulder and could run faster than a military vehicle. Their claws could cut through battle armor like paper. Their teeth could bite through metal. They had killed dozens of coalition troops over the years. But these were babies. And they were purring. "Hannah?" Jinho's voice came out as a whisper. He could not believe what he was seeing. She looked up at the sound of her name. Her face broke into a big smile when she saw them. "Thank the ancestors you found us," she said. She sounded so happy and relieved. Bom and Nuri here were getting restless. The moment she spoke, both cubs lifted their heads and looked directly at the 3 soldiers standing in the cave entrance. Their golden eyes were sharp and alert. They made a low rumbling sound that was clearly a warning. But instead of attacking or running away, the cubs moved to stand on either side of Hannah. They positioned their small bodies like shields, ready to protect her from any threat. Their eyes never left the newcomers. "You gave them names?" Veltar asked. His translator device struggled to handle the shock in his voice. The crystal being had never seen anything like this before. "Of course I named them," Hannah said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "This is Bom," she pointed to the slightly larger cub on her left, "and this little one is Nuri." The smaller cub made a soft chirping sound when she said its name. The cubs continued their low rumbling warning sound, which made all 3 soldiers take a step backward. Chinwei kept her weapon ready, but she looked confused. "Hannah, those things are dangerous," she said. "Even as babies they could hurt you." "They won't hurt anyone," Hannah said with complete confidence. She reached out and gently stroked Nuri's silver fur. The cub immediately stopped rumbling and began purring instead. "They're just protecting me because they think you might be a threat." Jinho stared in amazement. The cubs showed no aggression toward Hannah at all. Instead, they pressed closer to her, seeking her comfort and warmth. Their behavior was completely different from everything he had read in the military reports about Kithra. "How is this possible?" he asked. Hannah looked down at the 2 cubs, then back at her rescuers. For a moment she had no answer. She only knew that it felt right. The command briefing room felt thick with tension. Officers from 12 different species sat around the large metal table, all talking at once. Their voices mixed together into a confusing buzz of different languages and translation devices. At the center of all the arguments sat Corporal Kim Hana, looking small and tired but determined. Colonel Lee Soo-min, Hana's commanding officer, sat next to her. The colonel's face showed worry and confusion. She had known Hana for 2 years and trusted her completely. But this situation was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Across the table, General Thakmar waved all 4 of his arms as he spoke. The Zephyrian officer was tall and thin, with purple skin and large black eyes. His species was known for being very logical and careful about following rules. Right now he looked very upset. "The creatures must be locked up immediately," Thakmar said, his voice getting louder. "Every military book we have says that Kithra cannot be trusted. They are born killers. They hate all thinking species. This is scientific fact." Through the large window that looked out onto the training yard, everyone could see Bom and Nuri playing with Sergeant Choi Hyunwoo. The young soldier had volunteered to help take care of the cubs while Hana was in meetings. He was throwing a ball for them and they were bringing it back to him like friendly dogs. Both cubs had grown larger in the past week. They were now the size of medium dogs, but their movements were graceful and powerful. "Look at them," Hana said, pointing toward the window. "Do they look dangerous to you? Hyunwoo has been with them for hours every day. They have never tried to hurt him." "That proves nothing," snapped Commodore 9L from across the table. The insectoid officer's shell was bright green, and her large compound eyes reflected the room lights. When she was angry, her mandibles clicked together rapidly, making a sound like someone snapping their fingers very fast. One soldier getting lucky does not change thousands of years of recorded behavior. Captain Zor-El, whose species looked like walking trees, creaked as he leaned forward. "My people have fought Kithra for generations. They destroyed 3 of our colonies before we learned to avoid their territory completely. Adult Kithra show no mercy to any living thing. But these are not adults," Colonel Lee pointed out. "These are babies that Corporal Hana saved from starvation. Maybe that makes the difference." "Impossible," Thakmar said, shaking his head so hard his ear tentacles flapped. "Kithra psychology does not allow for emotional attachment. Their brains are built only for hunting and killing. Even their own parents abandon them after a few months." Dr. Yixera, the base's chief scientist, spoke up from the end of the table. Her voice was soft and musical, the way all Melodians spoke. "I have run every test possible on the cubs. Their brain scans show normal Kithra patterns. There is nothing different about their biology." "Then explain their behavior," demanded Ninel, her clicking sounds getting faster and more aggressive. "No Kithra in recorded history has ever formed a bond with another species. Why do these 2 follow humans around like pets? Why do they obey human commands but ignore everyone else?" All eyes turned to Hana. She could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on her. Everyone in the room wanted an answer from her. They wanted her to explain something that seemed impossible to them. Hana thought back to that first day in the cave. She remembered how the cubs had looked at her with their golden eyes. She remembered the moment when they had stopped being afraid and started trusting her instead. Something had passed between them in that moment, something she could feel but could not put into words. "I felt a connection with them from the very beginning," she said slowly. "When I saw them starving in that cave, I knew I had to help them. And somehow they knew I was trying to help." "That is not an explanation," Thakmar said impatiently. "That is emotion talking, not science. Feelings do not change biology." "But maybe biology is not the whole story," Hana replied. "Maybe there are things about forming bonds that we do not understand yet." Through the window they could see Hyunwoo sitting on the ground while Bom and Nuri curled up next to him for a nap. The cubs looked completely relaxed and happy. Other soldiers walked by without the cubs showing any fear or aggression. Commander Rex Tun, whose species had tentacles instead of arms, waved 2 of his tentacles in frustration. "This makes no sense according to everything we know. Kithra are supposed to be solitary hunters. They are not supposed to form packs or families or friendships." "Maybe what we know is wrong," suggested Lieutenant Park Jin-ho, who had been quiet until now. "Maybe we have only seen Kithra in fighting situations so we think that is all they can do." "Ridiculous," Thakmar said. "We have studied them for centuries. But have we ever tried to understand them?" Hana asked. "Or have we only tried to fight them?" The room fell silent for a moment. Everyone looked at each other, thinking about her question. Finally, Commodore 9L leaned forward and stared directly at Hana. "Explain their behavior," she demanded again. "Why do they follow you? Why do they trust humans when they trust no one else? What makes you special?" Hana opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. She could feel the answer somewhere deep in her mind, but she could not find the right words to express it. Because she began, then stopped. The single word hung in the air like smoke. The question would follow her everywhere for the next several weeks. The first light of dawn was just appearing over the mountains when the attack sirens began screaming across the base. Corporal Kim Hannah jumped out of her bed, her heart racing as she grabbed her gear. Through her window she could see enemy ships flying overhead like angry metal birds. The Vorthan forces had found them. Explosions shook the ground as enemy landing craft began dropping soldiers around the base walls. Red laser bolts flew through the air in every direction. The sound of weapons firing mixed with shouting voices and the roar of engines. Hannah ran toward her assigned defense position in Sector 7. As she ran, two large shapes appeared beside her, keeping perfect pace with her movements. Boem and Nuri had grown over the past months. They were now fully adult Kithara, each one as big as a small horse. Their silver and blue fur rippled over powerful muscles as they ran. Their golden eyes were alert and focused. When Hannah reached her position, she found Privates Kim Miho and Young Yuna already there, setting up their weapons behind a concrete barrier. Both soldiers looked nervous but ready to fight. They had trained with Bomb and Nuri many times, but this would be their first real battle together. Status report, Hannah called as she checked her medical supplies. Enemy forces landing on 3 sides, Miho replied, looking through his rifle scope. At least 50 hostiles heading our way. Boem and Nuri moved to take positions on either side of the human soldiers. Without anyone telling them what to do, Bomb crouched low behind cover on the left side, while Nuri climbed up onto a higher rock formation that gave her a clear view of the approaching enemy. Contact 200 meters. Miho shouted, pointing his rifle toward a group of Vorthan soldiers moving between the rocks. What happened next amazed everyone who saw it. The two Kithara did not just attack wildly like the savage beasts everyone expected them to be. Instead, they fought like trained soldiers who had been working with the human team for years. When Miho and Yuna moved forward to get better shooting positions, Boem moved with them, staying low and using the rocks for cover. When enemy soldiers tried to flank them from the right side, Nuri spotted them from her high position and made a series of short roars that clearly meant danger on the right. Hannah watched in amazement as Boem responded to Miho's hand signals. When the young soldier pointed left and made a circular motion with his finger, Bomb understood immediately and began moving around to attack the enemies from behind. When Yuna called out, "Overwatch needed," Nuri shifted her position to get a better view of the battlefield. The Vorthan forces had expected to fight human soldiers using standard tactics. They had not expected to face opponents who moved like a perfectly coordinated team that included 2 apex predators who seemed to think like soldiers. Boem used her incredible speed to dash between cover points, drawing enemy fire away from the humans. When Vorthan soldiers focused their weapons on her, Miho and Yuna could shoot at them from different angles. When the enemies tried to focus on the humans instead, Nuri would leap down from her high position and attack them with her razor-sharp claws. The battle lasted for 2 hours. When it was finally over, the surviving Vorthan forces were retreating back to their ships. The base had held, but many coalition soldiers had been wounded in the fighting. Hannah spent the rest of the morning in the medical bay, treating injured soldiers from the battle. Her hands moved quickly and efficiently, cleaning wounds and applying bandages. Boem and Nuri stood guard near the entrance, watching everyone who came in and out. General Thakmar found her there as she was finishing bandaging a plasma burn on Young Yuna's arm. The Zephyrian officer looked completely confused. All 4 of his arms hung at his sides, and his large black eyes stared at the 2 Kithara who were calmly watching over the medical bay. "Explain this," he demanded, but his voice was not angry anymore. Instead, he sounded like someone trying to solve a puzzle that made no sense. "How is this possible? Those creatures fought like trained soldiers. They followed orders. They worked as a team. This goes against everything we know about their species." Hannah looked up from her patient's bandaged arm. Suddenly, she understood something that had been hiding in the back of her mind for months. The answer to the question that everyone had been asking finally became clear to her. "Because," she said simply, "we learned long ago that survival is not about being the strongest predator." She stood up and walked over to where Boem was gently touching her nose to a wounded Andromedan soldier's crystal hand. The alien soldier looked surprised but not afraid. Boem was offering comfort the same way a therapy dog might back on Earth. "We learned that the strongest families are not made of the same blood," Hannah continued. "They are made of the same choice. The choice to protect each other." General Thakmar followed her gaze to where Boem was now lying down next to the wounded Andromedan, sharing her warmth with him while he recovered. Humans evolved alongside other species for thousands of years, Hannah explained. Wolves, horses, cats, birds, dozens of different animals. We did not conquer them or domesticate them by force. We adopted them. And they adopted us back. We chose to be family together. She looked at Nuri, who was carefully bringing water to thirsty patients using a bowl in her mouth. That is what humans do. We make families out of everyone willing to be family with us. 6 months had passed since the battle that changed everything. Dr. Kim Hannah now stood in her bright new laboratory aboard the research ship called Harmony's Edge. Through the large windows, she could see the surface of a distant planet where teams of humans and Kithra were working together to explore new worlds. Her uniform was different now. On her shoulder was a special patch that showed she belonged to the Interspecies Partnership Division. This was a completely new part of the coalition military that had been created just for her work. She was no longer just a medic. Now she was a scientist whose job was to help different species learn to work together. Captain Oh Taehyun walked up to her, carrying an electronic tablet full of reports. He was smiling widely, which was unusual for the normally serious officer. The reports are amazing, he said, showing her the data on his screen. Human soldiers have successfully made partnerships with 17 different species just in the past month. Even the Rigelians want to start a training program with us. The Rigelians were a species that had always kept to themselves. They had never wanted to work closely with other species before. The fact that they were now asking for human help was incredible news. Hannah smiled as she watched the teams working on the planet below. She could see Lieutenant Seo Jaiwan moving carefully through a cave system with her Kithra partner, who she had named Storm. Storm was a magnificent creature with dark fur that had streaks of silver running through it. The two of them moved together like dancers, each one knowing exactly where the other would step next. Next to Hannah in the laboratory, BOM and Nuri lay quietly on specially made resting pads. They had grown into fully mature adults now, each one weighing over 300 pounds of pure muscle and grace. Their intelligence had continued to develop as they grew. They could understand complex commands, solve problems, and even seem to read human emotions. But they were not pets or tools. They were partners and friends. You know what amazes me the most? Hannah said to Captain Taehyun as she watched the teams below. The galaxy spent thousands of years asking why certain species could not live together peacefully. They wrote research papers about it. They created theories about biological incompatibility. They accepted that some species would always be enemies. She turned away from the window to look at him directly. But they never thought to ask a different question. They never asked why humans could get along with almost any species they met. Captain Taehyun nodded thoughtfully. And now we know the answer, he said. Through the corridors of the ship, amazing sights had become normal daily life. In the cafeteria, Private Onmira sat sharing her lunch with a Vorthan engineer named Zektar. The same species that had attacked their base 6 months ago was now working alongside humans as friends and colleagues. Mira was teaching Zektar how to use chopsticks, and both of them were laughing at his clumsy attempts. In the recreation room, a crystalline Andromedan called Bright Song had learned to play card games with a group of human marines. His transparent body glowed different colors when he was happy or excited about getting good cards. The marines had quickly learned to read his emotional colors, which made the games more fun for everyone. In the engineering section, a massive creature that looked like a walking tree worked side by side with human mechanics to repair ship systems. His species, the bark speakers, had hands that could reach into spaces too small for humans, while the humans could operate delicate electronic equipment that the tree-like beings could not handle. Look at all this, Hannah said, gesturing toward the busy corridors. 6 months ago, most of these species would have been shooting at each other. Now they are sharing meals and playing games together. What made the difference? Captain Taehyun asked, even though he already knew the answer. Humans do not see other species as threats first, Hannah explained. We see them as potential friends first. When we meet someone new, our first instinct is not to fight or run away. Our first instinct is to try to understand them and find common ground. She knelt down next to Baum, who raised her great head and nuzzled against Hannah's hand affectionately. We spent millions of years on Earth learning to live with wolves and bears and horses and cats and birds. We learned that being different does not mean being enemies. We learned that the best families are not made of people who look the same, but people who choose to care about each other. A communication alert sounded throughout the ship. Captain Taehyun checked his tablet and smiled even more widely. We just received 3 more requests for partnership programs, he announced. The Singing Crystals of Vega 4 want human teams to help them explore underwater cities. The Cloud Dancers of the Nebula Systems want to learn human music. And the stone shapers of Rigel 7 want to teach humans their building techniques. Hannah stood up and looked out the window again at the teams working below. Soon there would be dozens of such teams, then hundreds, then thousands. The galaxy was learning something new about cooperation and friendship. The universe is a big, sometimes dangerous place, she said quietly. But it does not have to be a lonely place. Not anymore. Nuri made a soft purring sound and walked over to stand beside her human partner. Together, they watched as a new age of understanding began to spread across the stars, one friendship at a time.